Hey everybody, welcome to my final exam review series. So throughout the semester, we've learned how the human body responds and adapts to exercise. And in today's video, I'll be reviewing skeletal muscle physiology and resistance training adaptations by connecting the physiology that we've learned to these functional exercises. You know, one of the biggest themes in exercise physiology is that the body is constantly trying to maintain homeostasis while adapting to the stress we place upon it. And resistance training is a perfect example because every repetition challenges the neuromuscular system, requiring coordinated muscle activation, ATP production, and overall long-term adaptation. So as I'm doing these sit-to-stands, one of the first systems working is the nervous system. So before my muscles can contract, my brain sends an electrical signal through motor neurons to the working muscles. This process begins with an action potential traveling down to the neuromuscular junction where acetylcholine, or ACH, is released to stimulate the muscle fiber. Now, this electrical signal spreads across the muscle membrane and triggers excitation-contraction coupling. Calcium is released into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It binds to troponin, causing trypomyosin to move away from the active sites on actin. And this allows myosin heads to attach to actin and begin the cross-bridge cycle. That process is overall known as the sliding filament theory, where actin filaments slide towards the center of the sarcomere as myosin pulls on them. Every time I stand up from this chair, thousands of sarcomeres, honestly probably hundreds of thousands of sarcomeres, shorten simultaneously to produce movement. I might have been a little generous on hundreds of thousands, but probably thousands. Throughout this entire process, ATP is essential, and ATP provides the energy required to form the power stroke, which is what allows the myosin heads to detach from actin in order for another contraction to occur. So without ATP, muscles would be unable to repeatedly contract and relax. Now that I've transitioned into step-ups, I've increased the workload, and the demand for force production is overall great. It's greater overall. This exercise requires coordinated activation for the quads, glutes, hamstrings, and calves, while maintaining balance throughout the movement. And because the force requirements are increasing, my nervous system recruits additional motor units, including larger fast twitch fibers when necessary. So throughout the semester, we've also learned about different muscle fiber types. So, you get type 1 fibers, which are slow twitch fibers that are primarily aerobic. So they produce less force, but are highly resistant to fatigue and important for endurance activities. Then you got type 2A and type 2X. Now, type 2A are fast oxidative glycolytic fibers and generate greater force while maintaining moderate fatigue. Type 2X produces the highest amount of force and power, but fatigue much more rapidly because they rely heavily on anaerobic energy production. Resistance training recruits these fibers depending on the intensity of the exercise being performed. One of the earliest adaptations to resistance training is actually neurological, in a sense, rather than muscular. So, during the first several weeks of training, strength improves only because the nervous system becomes more efficient at recruiting these motor units and improving synchronization and reducing inhibitory signals that normally would limit force production. And as resistance training continues over time, chronic adaptations begin to occur. So repeated mechanical overload stimulates muscle protein synthesis, thus leads to hypertrophy and an overall increase in muscle fiber size. Now, there's not an increase in the number of muscle fibers, but just increase in the size overall. Now, another major principle we discussed in this semester is progressive overload. So for muscles to continue adapting, the workload must gradually increase over time, and without progressively increasing, improvements in strength and muscle eventually plateau because the body has currently adapted to the workload. Now we're transitioning into a walking recovery here, and as I'm entering recovery, my muscles begin restoring ATP and phosphocreatine stores while repairing the microscopic damage created during resistance exercise. Recovery is where many of the long-term adaptations actually occur, and during recovery, protein synthesis continues rebuilding muscle tissue and allows the muscle to become stronger before the next training session. And that is exactly why recovery is just as important as the exercise itself, and without adequate recovery, the body cannot fully adapt to the training stimulus. Now, just to kind of summarize everything up again, resistance training begins with communication between the nervous system and skeletal muscle through excitation-contraction coupling and sliding filament, ATP provides the energy necessary for muscle contraction, and while motor units are recruited according to size principle to meet increasing force demands, progressive overload produces neural adaptations, muscle hypertrophy, stronger connective tissue, and improved force production, and these adaptations demonstrate one of the central principles of exercise physiology.